All right. Welcome everybody to this inaugural Design Education Conversations event. My name is Mike Clayton. I'm a professor of graphic design at the University of the Incarnate Word in San Antonio, Texas, and the UCDA Design Education Summit Chair for 2021. I'd like to welcome you all to Reappointment, Promotion, and Tenure, the first of many conversations that UCDA will host throughout the coming years. Just to kind of read the blurb here, Design Education Conversations is an initiative UCDA has started after hearing from our members that you want more opportunities to commune with your fellow educators. So we plan to hold these conversations periodically via Zoom on various topics that are meaningful to our community. And we figured that, hey, the Design Education Summit was the perfect place to launch this program. So moderating the discussion on reappointment, promotion, and tenure are two members of the UCDA Design Education Committee. Tonight, we're joined by Dr. Denise Bosler, the Department Chair of Communication Design, and MFA Program Director at Kutztown University in Pennsylvania, and Kelly Salco MacArthur, Professor of Graphic Design from Michigan State University. My co-chair and I, Jonathan Struby, will also be helping out with some of the stuff in this conversation. But Denise and Kelly, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Michael.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
So Denise, maybe we should start with the few questions that were included in the blurb of this conversation today.
Sounds great.
So how does reappointment, promotion, and tenure differ between different kinds of higher education institutions? And we should mention that sorry.
No, go ahead, Kelly.
I was just going to say this is an absolute open discussion, and we would love to hear from everyone who would like to chime in here.
Yes, so this is meant to be a discussion with all of us here. We're just leading the discussion, but we are not looking to take over all the answers. So what we are hoping for is a really open discussion between all of us, because we all come from very different universities, and the tenure and promotion process, it's scary. It's difficult sometimes. It's a lot to do and a lot to gather as you're trying to go for that next level and that next step. And the more we can help each other, I think the better it is. So we definitely want everybody to be able to chime in. But Kelly, do you want to start at your university, and I can follow that up, and then that will help lead us into everybody else.
So I'm at Michigan State University. I've been there for 16 years. Let's see, before that, I was at the Kansas City Art Institute. So it's a private college of art and design with a teaching focus as compared to a public four-year Research One institution with a research focus. There were two very different kind of systems. And I think probably one of the places that I would start in terms of what the difference is between different higher education institutions would be what the percentage breakdown is of the academic efforts that we're each expected to fulfill. So at MSU, for instance, it's 40% research, 40% teaching, and 20% service and outreach. But the unspoken truth is that the real focus is on research. And then I think another difference that we would probably see across different institutions is that the kind of documentation, the level of rigor, the kind of external review that these promotion and tenure cases may face, and how those external reviewers are either anonymous or not, if they can be connected to the institution or not. From what I can gather, the kind of documentation that we're expected to do at Michigan State University is really extensive as compared to other institutions. So we need to show proof of everything that we're stating is an accomplishment. We need to show emails and photos and documentation, and in whatever form we can gather. And so it becomes, for instance, when I went up for full professor a couple of years ago, I turned in 1,000 pages of documentation. So that was a project a couple of years in the making, just pulling all of that together. Denise, what do you think? What are some differences?
There are some differences in that respect. And at our university, it's actually changing for the next couple of years. So I'm a full professor, so I've gone through the process twice now. And at Kutztown University, we're a state school, and we're technically more teaching focused. I say technically because when it hits tenure and promotion, things like that aren't always the case. We are expected to do research and service. Service is really big, as is, I don't want to say research, professional development is really what we are expected to do. Up until recently, like yourself, we were expected to pretty much document everything. I did serve on the university promotion committee at one time, so I have experience with the process in that way. And you know, the binders that I've turned in are just massive, and there's a lot of them, and everything you could possibly think of is in them. Our university, though, is moving toward a electronic submission now. I feel like we're behind the times, but I don't know. The rest of you might be able to fill me in on what's happening at other universities out there, but we're moving towards an electronic submission process in which you're providing teaching evidence, your SRIs, which are student results of your classes, all of your evaluations and things like that, your CV, you know, the kind of that primary stuff, but you're no longer going to be asked to provide proof of everything. Hopefully the proof is in your CV, and it should be able to be easily looked up and researched to see if it's legit or not. Hopefully you can prove that within your CV. But moving forward, they're doing away with all that proof, which is really, really nice. And if the chat is active, by the way, if you want to chime in with anything in the chat, a colleague of mine, Josh Miller, is here. He saw my binders, so he's commenting on that. But when I was in UPC, we don't actually have percentages that we are after per se. When people go up for tenure and promotion the first time around, tenure is a little bit heavier in teaching, promotion's a little bit more heavy in professional development as well as service. But we kind of looked at it as three glasses, you know, how full are they? So at the first level of tenure and promo, when you're going from assistant to associate, we were looking for at least 2 full glasses and 1 pretty much half full. And when you're going up for full promotion, you should have 3 full glasses that are overflowing, is kind of how we set it. So there's not really, and Josh is actually currently on the UPC committee. He's nodding his head yes. But that's kind of how we view it at our university, because it's not an exact percentage that they go after in that respect. So it's a little bit subjective. But the professional development aspect of it can be everything from writing to presentations to conferences, such as this one, to pretty much everything under the sun. Yes, and Josh is now the chair of the University Promotion Committee. So if you really want to get into the nitty gritty, he can certainly answer questions. I'm going to put him on the spot. So a lot of you know Josh already. So that's kind of how Kutztown is. So we're a little bit different in that respect. We're expected to do a little bit of everything. My dean just told me recently that what she's looking for in evaluations is that at least on your student responses, that you are 80% or higher. So all the questions that are answered, you better be at least 80% or higher as an overall, or else you're kind of in trouble. So as far as your teaching components are, but that's how Kutztown works.
I think it's nice to have something so concrete, because I feel like something that's difficult within this whole process is the amorphous qualities of it. You know, I think there are so many questions, and probably even in one institution, people approach it in different ways and have different experiences as they move through the RPT process. I was noticing in the chat here that Michael said that 20% is discretionary, which seems like a really generous gesture, you know?
Yeah, you know, we're labeled as a teaching institution, but you know, as they always say, scholarship is the unwritten, you know, monster in the room that they just want you to put all of your energy into. But what that does, it allows new faculty to spend a little bit more time in their first year on teaching as they're developing courses and things like that. And then as we go up for a 3rd year review, because at our university, it's it used to be promotion, tenure or promotion after 5 years, tenure after 6. So people could get promoted but not tenured. But we've hooked those together So after 6 years, it's an up and out. You know, you go up for promotion and tenure at the same time. We have a third year review. So with that discretionary, it gives those individuals an opportunity to focus on teaching for a time and then ramp up their research and scholarship as they move through. Or if they are asked to, you know, chair something as audacious as rank and tenure, you know, you can go through and put some more into service, or you can put some more into professional development as you're going through and building and sculpting yourself to fit the role that you're in. If you're starting a new program and need training and you need to spend some more time in that development, you can move that time. And so through our evaluation process with our dean, we can go through, and at the beginning of the year, we can start to take that 20% and put it where we feel we need it. And then as we do our year-end review, we can kind of massage that and change it as needed. And it becomes something that helps the faculty understand that while there is that structure, there is a bit of fluidity that we can use to focus on our own interests and to gauge, you know, where we want to be and plan for our futures. And it's nice to have that wiggle room.
That is nice. Josh just put up the rubric that we use. Well, the published rubric from our union that's kind of used for promotion and tenure process. So if anybody wants to check that out, and it's based upon our contract. There is actually an entire section that spells out what everything is in our contract, and that's what it follows. So I'm looking at a chat question right now. So the question from Liz is, I'm a foreigner. Hi, Liz. That's been in the US for almost a year and currently teaching graphic design at Indiana University. And I'm also at a teaching university. But do they expect development, research, creative output, which will be considered towards tenure, et cetera? May I ask what is considered creative output in design? Excellent question. The art professors do exhibitions and judge shows, but how do you stay relevant with additional design for creative output? Much appreciated. That's a fantastic question. Oh my gosh, there's so many different things. Kelly's smiling already. Kelly, do you want to start?
Yeah, I think this is tricky, right? Because most of us find ourselves in a department with fine artists and maybe art historians, and there may be another mix in there as well. But I think the really important thing is that we find the relevance and demonstrate the relevance of our discipline within whatever context we find ourselves in, you know, and we probably have to be the ones advocating for ourselves in many cases. I can say that in my own experience, I've written and I've also designed. I consider myself more of a maker than a writer. And so when it comes to creative activity, I'll either create self-initiated projects, or I'll work with a client or a commission, or I'll collaborate on something, or I'll create work for an exhibition. A lot of times I think graphic designers have great opportunities in terms of design competitions, because as we all know, there aren't a lot of exhibition opportunities in galleries for graphic designers specifically. And if we do submit our work, when it's kind of an open call for any media, there may be a chance that graphic design isn't as welcome. So the design competitions like the UCDA competition is great and very competitive. Graphice and HAL and print and communication arts. If anyone's interested in designing posters, there are a lot of poster design competitions out there. And typically the reach of the work is expected to ramp up as you make your way through the RPT process. So if you're within your first 3 years of probationary, you know, when you're coming up for reappointment, maybe you're working in kind of a regional or a local context or looking to national. But then as you go into tenure, your tenure review, you're probably working more nationally. And then by the time you're full professor, you should be international. And of course, that's always going to be a mix, and there's no like hard boundary there, but you can probably look at CVs of academics and see that the kind of evolution of their impact has taken that general trajectory. And I can see that in my own, that it started regional and then it went to national and now it's international. One last thing I'll say about this is that, at least at MSU, the big thing that demonstrates relevance of any of that creative activity that I've done is that it's been peer reviewed. So it's not enough for me to just create it, but it needs to be reviewed, peer reviewed, and then we can go into the weeds about who those peers are and if it's blind or double blind or how many jurors there are, what the percentage acceptance rate is, but all that kind of stuff gets tied into it. But MSU keeps emphasizing peer review. Otherwise, if I've designed something and it hasn't been accepted through peer review, I can't list it as an accomplishment, basically.
To follow that up, the peer review part is absolutely important, and statistics are the other big thing that go along with it, especially with the awards. And awards are a really great way for us. I mean, in our department, within the graphic design field, interactive design and all of that, there's exhibitions and there's awards and there's writing. I'm like Kelly, I do writing and as well as other types of things. And then the types of things that help us back it up, why it's important. Basically, when we're going up for promotion and tenure, is the most important thing is to explain why, because what happens on tenure and promotion committees, it's everybody at the university. So, you know, we can have scientists and historians and people from women's studies and people from the education department, and they can all serve on the tenure committee. So it's very difficult to sometimes explain what we do as designers and artists to those that have no idea what we're doing. They think it's a little magic button on a keyboard that says like design and it's magic, and all of a sudden it's created. And so they don't always get it. So the biggest thing is to explain what your creativity is and why it's so important. We also like to back up awards with stats. X number were accepted or X number were submitted and only this many was accepted, because they understand that, especially because in journals, you also have those types of acceptance rates. Where is it national, regional, international? So creativity though, also can come in the form, at least for us, in teaching improvement. So it can be submitting to conferences such as this, which is also considered creative because that's what our subject matter is. And a lot of the work too that people do as freelance work. I mean, I'm an active freelancer, and how heavily does it weigh? I don't know, but it does keep me in the field and it does give me the work I need for award shows and perhaps exhibitions and things like that. But, you know, just branching away from the creativity side, there are so many other different things that you could possibly do. To Josh's point though, in the chat here, we have a document that we created in our department. We submitted it to our union. The union said, this looks great, we agree. And yet the president of the university and the university promotion committee, aside from Josh, don't agree with the things that are on it. Our president currently, because it does change per president, our president currently thinks the only scholarship is writing. That's it. He's hyper focused on that particular thing. Now, fortunately, the university promotion committee, which Josh chairs, is a lot more open than the current president. And they do look at the merit of everything that everybody is creating. However, you know, you do have those types of issues at universities. I'm sure all of you have those types of university issues in some form or another. How about anybody else out there? Yeah.
I think that's incredible that it made its way through the ranks only to be kind of halted at the very top.
We keep referring to it anyway in all of our letters and all of our evaluations. We just continue to refer to it because it was approved by the union.
And on a
eventually
diverse,
somebody might recognize it.
Yeah, on a diverse university campus where not everybody writes, they're scientists and people creating different kind of scholarship, not always through writing. That's really incredible.
You know, going
Fortunately,
back to
the president is not the sole decider, which is helpful.
So going back to the topic of going before a committee that doesn't understand what you do. You know, the rank and tenure committee here is comprised of representatives from every school, every college, and everything. And when they go through and take a look at, you know, so when I've submitted, I've gone through the tenure process and full professor promotion and everything. And the first time that I did it, I was able to turn in my binders and my books and everything, and they could tactile see it and they could really understand and turn through the pages. But in going through the electronic submission for my second promotion, I was promoted to full professor 3 years ago. And they had just started doing the full electronic stuff. They had a lot of questions, and there was things that the narratives, you know, they I don't know if they didn't read everything or whatever, but I was called before the committee to justify and to talk about some of my creative outlets and some of the things that I do, because, you know, being an engineer or being a nurse or being a poet, they couldn't quite understand what it was that I was doing. And to be able to go in and articulate what it is that you're doing, it was really interesting. And it wasn't a meeting to like, they're trying to throw you out. They're just trying to understand. And great shared experiences like that really do help everyone on campus understand what we do within the applied arts or creative arts or whatever they've pigeonholed you into. So be prepared to, as we have our students do, to talk about your work and write your narratives very well. Because I went in and I had listed on my CV that I had been the guest on several podcasts, and someone was like, well, that shouldn't count for anything because, you know, whatever. I'm like, but it's in my field and I'm talking about what I'm doing. And I had listed how many unique listens that it had. And one of the guys in the committee, one of the folks from the School of Optometry, he just threw his hands in the air and said, this one podcast has 2,400 unique listeners in 4 months. He's like, my last presentation that I gave at a conference, I had 10 people in. I mean, that's got to have some sort of, you know, weight and something like that. And so it kind of put those into perspective, the scope of your audience. And he was like, this is an international discussion of whatever. So yeah. And as they talk together and as they, you know, deliberate those things, you can really find different avenues to have as your outlet.
Yeah, I think that's so important to be able to contextualize what we do. And, you know, for that narrative component of the dossier, if we can, I mean, there's so many things we have to do in there. We have to, in some cases, identify what graphic design is and how it can be disseminated and what it can create and who it touches and how ubiquitous it is and how important it is and how it's just as relevant as any other major on the campus. You know, I found it really tricky to kind of write for all the committees that it would go through on the campus, but then also write for the external reviewers, because of the external reviewers, of course, are the, you know, the people that know very well what graphic design is and understand all of its implications. But I think emphasizing the impact and the reach and the dissemination always helps. And probably taking a lot of time for that piece of writing is a good idea. To go over it a bunch of times. I reached out to a bunch of mentors as well. So I contacted people at other institutions at the rank that I would be applying to and said, you know, can you take a look at this? Is there anything that stands out? And I had mentors here at MSU that I reached out to and was sure to give them enough time. And what that helped me to do was identify anything that could be an issue and figure out how to address it proactively. So before anyone could ask a question about it, I would, you know, kind of give the answer in the written document. I think some of us are also get nervous about who might be on those committees, like interpersonally. And my best advice for that is to try to make such a strong case that they would look like idiots to discount your case, you know, like it would be obvious that there's some some tension there that is rearing its ugly head, and they're not being subjective. Or I should say objective. We have some other good questions in the chat.
Yes, we do. Nick was asking, can we talk more about the graphic design document that we have at Kutztown that shows committees what graphic design is? And I'm happy to do that. We actually have up to point Q of all the types of things that could potentially count as graphic design. So there's a lot of different things, but I have to say, the one thing that is made very, very clear in the document, that to what Kelly was saying, it actually says it is the responsibility of the applicant to clarify and demonstrate the professional reputation and significance of the noted achievements. And so it's really, really important to be very clear. Jonathan makes a great point in the comments too, that it's great to have committee and non-designers read your narratives ahead of time. And it's wonderful advice, because if they have no idea what you're talking about, you didn't actually make your case very well. I have a very good friend of mine who's a physician, and I send her stuff all the time. And if she doesn't get it, then I know I didn't explain it very well. My mom's great for that too. My mom has no idea what I do. And she's a wonderful proofreader. So to Kelly's point too, is, and I see an external reviewer thing here. We at Kutztown don't have external reviewers. It's all internal. However, I have been an external reviewer for other universities. So it's a very interesting process, whether they stays internal or external. But back to the document, we really go through all the different types of things that graphic design can be in terms of professional activity. So we even just say the words like professional activity, because it's so many different things, including awards, publications being reviewed, perhaps, invitation, not just peer reviewed sometimes, but sometimes it's invitation to be able to present papers and or at other conferences, especially if it's something notable. You know, if you're, I was asked by the Art Directors Club of Tulsa. I've never been to Oklahoma before. It was fascinating, but that was an invitation, and I was able to prove the fact that that was special, because you know they only ask so many people, and it's a large organization and things like that. So we talk about invitation versus peer review, that some invitation is actually good and it's just as valid as peer review, depending on what it happens to be. Other things we have are to be a juror for somebody else, to be a peer reviewer for something else, whether it's a paper or a conference or a competition. Other types of things are grants and fellowships that are out there to be able to produce your work. Grants are quite big sometimes, depending on what you can get. Josh and I were just turned down for a grant. It was very disappointing. We tried really hard. It didn't work, but we just keep trying. And then sometimes it's commissioned projects. And that's another part of what we have on here, because you can be commissioned by somebody really pretty amazing to be able to work on a project. And so as long as your narrative is right, that can count as well. So we talk about non-traditional forms too, such as online publications, online blogs, podcasts, like Michael said. But again, it's all about creating that narrative. And so we really do go through absolutely everything you could possibly do as a designer, as also as a design educator, that would count. We just hope people read it. We use it. We use it to help, especially our junior faculty, with the mentorship of them on saying, these are all the types of things that you can do, with the reality of, just remember that the president really likes writing. But there's lots of other things that you can do.
You know, I wanted to go back to Moon Young Yang's, and I hope I'm saying that correctly, comment from earlier.
Oh.
At the University of Georgia, research is 50%, teaching is 50%. So you should be done there, right? But for promotion, they also require different levels of service, like department, college, university, professional field, and larger communities like national, international scale, which that sounds like, first of all, they should readjust those percentages, because that's not fair. Everybody knows that the academics put in a lot of service, all the committee work that we do, you know. I wonder if, because of the percentages of 50-50, there might be ways to, at least in professional field and larger community like service roles, there might be a way to kind of filter it back into either your teaching or your research, big chunks of effort, so that if service isn't really given much weight in terms of the percentage, you can still kind of tuck it into the accomplishments under research and teaching.
And I think that's one of the things too that, you know, we really stress that our faculty do service, because then it gets them out into the university community. And so they are known by other departments, other schools, other people, and not just siloed within one area. And sometimes it's through those relationships and through those committees that we can join other grants and collaborations and really be able to, you know, broaden our name on campus and our own department on campus, and create opportunities. So yeah, you know, don't go out there and be like on 5 committees in 1 year, you know, kind of rotate and pick and strategize with those within your department and within your school, so that you're not monopolized. The full professors in my school, we all took a pact that we weren't going to do major committees for 4 years, so that the younger faculty were brought up so that they could go and sit on those committees and get their names out there. It's like, we're old dogs. We know the game. We've been there. You know, throw the pups out there and see if they survive. And the cool thing is they come back with a thank you, because they get to have that extra experience, and we get a break from having to, you know, sit through another faculty senate meeting.
That's a really good point. We haven't really talked much about service, and I'm kind of curious to see what are the kind of service requirements that the others have. I mean, you know, at Kutztown, it's teaching, scholarly growth, professional development / professional development, and service, and it's distinct, 3 distinct areas, and that you are expected to do for any kind of promotion. And all faculty are expected to do it, continue to do it after their promotion. It's part of the contract. And I'm kind of curious to see out there with everybody else, what is your percentage of service out there? You know, I can, to Gabby's point out here, it's definitely a serious issue of, I think, just representation in general, and also being overworked. I can tell you I am drowning in service work, and I should say no, a whole lot more than I do. But I don't. I don't know, maybe it's my personality, but I think there's a lot of opportunities also out there for people. What are your service requirements? What kind of service are you expected to do at your universities that do count towards tenure and promotion? I'm catching everybody off guard. I'm asking you questions.
Hello, everyone. I can jump in and explain what services I have done at the University of Georgia. UGA is Research One school research institution. So on the contract, everyone has 50% teaching and 50% research. But the art school, we are integrated with the design and the studio art areas together. So every professor at the school must do some committee works. Every other years, they change the committees. And in my way of approaching the service work is I interplay between my teaching practices and the committee work. So for example, if I create some kind of visiting designers in my classes, I have that service integrated with the visiting designer committee for the entire school. So I don't, you know, need to overlap too much work for both my teaching practices and the service for the school. I don't know if that answers or help.
Definitely, there's a large variety of comments in the chat about the types of service that people are expected to do. And Gabby, Also mentioned something about professional service at her university is more important than college service. We're a little bit more like Michael, where there's department service, there's college service, there's university service, there's community service, there's national organization service. Like they all kind of like go up in rank. Department service is kind of expected, but you should be doing it. And then college service and then university service. So it kind of works its way up like that. It's very interesting to see the types of different service that everybody is expected to do. And then, you know, Liz mentions here that you have to be on at least three committees. Now we don't have a requirement like that. So it's interesting. Liz, is that part of that's your department saying in order to get tenure and promotion, you have to be on at least three committees, or is that a requirement of your university? I'm putting you on the spot.
Sorry, I just unmuted myself quickly. Yes, from my understanding, because I'm new, so I've worked in South Africa for 9 years in the industry. I worked in the industry for 7 years and teaching for 9 years. So this has been my first year in America, and wow, I'm very overwhelmed. You know, there's a lot of stuff and a lot of new stuff and different things, how things are working. So it is my understanding that I have to be on at least 3 committees for the tenure track. Yeah. So at the moment, I'm still artist in resident because it's the only way that could get me over with COVID, you know, so, but yeah, to work towards tenure, that's the thing. Yeah, 3 committees at least. So I'm at 2 in the moment because, you know, with COVID, a lot of the committees have kind of like just stalled a little bit, if that helps.
Again, I think that clarity is really helpful because I think the not knowing is scary. So I think that's a great thing. I wanted to kind of circle back on Gabby's point that, let's see, I'm going to read it here. A serious issue that needs to be addressed is representation. Women, especially women of color, tend to be overworked in terms of service. This is a conversation we're having at Michigan State University as well. And it's pretty clear that the service loads are not equally placed sometimes. I think times are changing. I really do. I think we're getting more aware and sensitive and thoughtful in a lot of ways, I hope. Of course, the last few years, one wonders. I can say that going through the RPT process, I had two children within that process. I had one baby before I went up for tenure, and I did everything I could so that if someone looked at my CV, they wouldn't be able to tell that I had had a child. When I had my second child, I was going up for full professor soon, and I did the same thing. Now, I think that's kind of sad that I did that. I didn't want to have motherhood be a detriment or make it look like I wasn't fully committed to my job. I didn't put the tenure clock on hold. But when I did have to find external reviewers, especially this last time for full professor, I went out of my way to find women who were practicing design and not primarily writers, because that's, you know, I wanted someone who understood what kind of work I was doing and hopefully saw the relevance of it. And even better, someone who was a mother. And finding those criteria of full professors at peer institutions, Research One institutions, it was really, really hard. There was a handful. So that really seemed like a wake-up call. And Gabby, I'm not even talking about women of color. I mean, that's a whole nother, you know, sparse group that is represented in academia. I really hope that as we move forward, that starts to change. And I think it is. We can see this with new hires and with all of the dialogue going on. AIGA and UCDA are, you know, generating some great conversations about this. And I think the more open we can be and the more supportive of each other in all of our differences, the better the institutions will be, the better academia will be for it, the more well-rounded and empathetic and forward-looking students we will be working with. You know, this I think continues to just be an evolution, which I hope we can see the progress of each year. And I hope that didn't sound too preachy.
No, I think it sounded great. I think a lot of universities are striving toward that as much as they possibly can. I think it, you know, I think every university is different, but I think a lot of everybody is acknowledging that it's an important topic that needs to be at the table with all of the service and all of the work that we're doing, for sure. I wanted to move on to a different question because we have about 15 minutes left. And I wanted to see where everybody is feeling. Perhaps I'm assuming that whether you're full and you're looking to mentor junior faculty, or you're here because you are in the position where you're going to be going up for promotion, where is it do you find that perhaps you're lacking, that perhaps you would need some advice on, or you are worried about within your own scope of the work that you've done or the service that you've done? Where are you falling right now? Silent. Can you either unmute or put it in chat? Or where do perhaps, if you are a mentor, where do you find that your junior faculty are lacking or need the most help with? Because that will help us who are in the position where we're mentoring junior faculty, help them a little bit better. So Gabby mentioned writing. Gabby has mentioned writing is always an issue, especially with English not being your first language, which, you know what, I never thought about that before. And I can imagine that is definitely difficult. Do you have a mentor, Gabby, that works with you?
Let me unmute myself for a minute. I'm audio only today, so mentors. Well, I've been involved with the IGA for a long time. So my mentors have been, not only colleagues of mine who have been wonderful in that regard, but also, other people who have been related to journal reviewing and, more senior faculty members. Not anyone whose English is not their first language though. So I think, that's something that I'm still trying to find. And I think is really necessary because, I mean, even, the most meaningless conjunctions in English, I may be getting them wrong, right? And that I'm aware that that could really take away the seriousness of or the rigor of my writing in some cases. So what I've been doing in the last couple of years is going back to a more visual kind of academic writing, if that makes sense. So visual essaying, collaging, things that photo essays, things that really help me make the point that I'm trying to make. That and I feel more comfortable doing that kind of visual work anyway. So I've been really happy to see that more and more the journals are accepting visual essays as part of that same sort of rigor of academic writing, let's say. But yeah, I mean, if we can just continue working with each other in terms of writing, that's always helpful, especially for graduate students, right? When they're starting to write as well. Yeah, that's my experience.
So I've got a question for Gabby. What does your institution think about you just writing and publishing in your native language and giving lectures and demonstrations within, your native tongue? We have a faculty member here who constantly goes down to Central and South America and gives workshops and presentations in Spanish and does writing in Spanish and just has it peer reviewed by designers that are bilingual so that the committee gets an understanding of what's going on. I think that it's really myopic for us to think that everything has to be just done in English.
Oh, absolutely. I think that, you know, at least here at the University of Florida, there in my area, in my graphic design area, many of us have worked internationally. So we are very much aware of, you know, the importance of disseminating and writing in other languages. So I've been doing that as well. I've presented in Mexico, in Argentina. So there is, those things are welcome, but and that helps with internationalizing your profile as well, right? As Kelly was talking about before. So, but yeah, I mean, regardless, there is always something to write about that in English that will require, you know, an extra kind of brain chip that needs to be lit up, right? And it's always a challenge, but yeah, no, I totally agree with you. It should definitely be more of the international kind of multilingual dissemination that, you know, needs to take more of a central attention to, you know, to what we're doing.
And one other thing too is don't be afraid to co-author, you know,
Oh yeah. Mhm.
and that, because that can be something to really help not only
It
bounce
helps, yeah.
ideas off, but, you know, looking to co-author. And if you can publish a paper in 2 languages or 2 different audiences, that's just, that's fantastic. I have a brother who's a linguist. I only speak English and bad English, and that's it. But he's got like 5 or 6 languages, and you know, it always just, I don't know. I'm jealous.
And I'm jealous of good English writing.
Well, as one person told me once, that other person's broken English means they speak a second language. I just, you know, yeah, very in awe, because it's something I've tried to do and I just can't seem to.
So there's a couple of other comments that have come up in the chat here, and I'm just going to start back at the top. Jonathan mentions that balance is an issue. I think that's what you're saying. Balance is an issue, that institutions have self-awareness when placing new tasks and demands on faculty. And I know that a lot of our junior faculty absolutely face balance issues. And I think that sort of, you know, how much service and how much research and how much teaching responsibility we have. Because, you know, why are we in education? We're there to teach. And I think that there's a lot of times in which responsibility, and Stacy mentions it down below just a little bit later, that with budget cuts, oh, we're all experiencing those, right? Those damn budget cuts, that our university has asked everybody to step up and do more and more and more. And it's trying to find that balance within that, and helping our junior faculty not burn out is another big one. I know that in our department, I'm always constantly worried that the faculty that step up, the junior faculty that are amazing, I want to keep asking them to do things, but I don't want to burn them out at the same time, because I know they can. And, you know, if you're trying to run a freelance business and you're trying to teach and you're trying to do service and you're trying to, you know, get all your research or your professional development done, that it becomes burdensome to some point where, you know, I worry about losing them completely, which is absolutely a problem. And where do we find that balance? I don't have that answer for sure. I don't know. I think I burn myself out every day, so I can't even take care of myself, let alone my junior faculty. But I try really, really hard to at least talk to them in a way that, asking them if that's truly something that they want to pursue before they volunteer for that next thing that's on their list, and helping them decide what is worth it and what is not. What is really going to help them with that promotion and tenure process and what is not. Even if it's something that they really want to do, but it's going to give them no value, I do encourage them to say no. And, you know, perhaps they can do it a little bit on their own time, but, you know, I want to get them to at least a certain point where they're in really good shape for that. There's a bunch of other comments up here about where do you submit papers, like journals, as well as even the idea that you're working on interdisciplinary work, and Sherry brings this up, interdisciplinary work, and how do you get recognition for that? Because it's not necessarily a design thing, right? You're working with others. And at what point does that count? Right? So if you're getting recognized in other disciplines, does that count on your CV? Does that count towards your tenure and promotion process?
I would think so,
Any
yeah.
thoughts on that?
I think it does. And I think something that's really important when working in collaborative projects is to clarify what you did and, you know, how much of that project you took on. I think sometimes in collaborative work, it's assumed that you didn't do the majority of it. And actually, if you're a woman, the assumption is that you were the secondary investigator, you know. So clarifying what that is, that's something that has recently been added to our bylaws, that in collaborative work, it's important that we each clarify what percentage of that project we contributed to. But I would, in terms of interdisciplinary stuff, I would maybe look to, like, if the project is more relevant or could be accepted into a peer-reviewed journal along the lines of one of the fields of someone else in that group, then that could be a possible way to get it peer-reviewed. And in terms of budget cuts, I think something else that is happening with budget cuts is that, at least it seems to me, and probably not just at MSU, but the tenure track searches are dwindling. More institutions are relying on fixed term faculty positions, whether it's 1 year or 3 years. But at least at MSU, if you're not tenure track, you're not expected to do service. So inherently, every time someone retires or someone moves on, then the service loads for those of us who are tenure track get heavier. And I think that kind of points right back to the institutions hopefully watching out for, you know, our work-life balance that we hear about and we want to practice.
I just wanted to add real quick, Kelly. I think that's important to look beyond other sort of peer review bodies than just design peer review bodies. I had great success in working with an engineering for a collaborative project. So this is really an answer to you too, Sherry. And presenting at the engineering conference and being peer reviewed by engineers and all of that, and defining my role, but you know, it's primary because a lot of the project was user interface design within the context of an engineering model. So I just had to write a really strong narrative that said, hey, I worked with these people as a designer, brought these skill sets to the table. It's peer reviewed by an international conference. We presented on all the stuff. And then I showed the design stuff, but really it was easy for them to see that, hey, this project doesn't function without the skill sets of a designer being at the table and being successful. So yeah, I would look at bodies beyond, or, you know, people that are not AIGA, you know, or some of the, like, traditional monikers that we go to for peer review.
I don't know if other institutions have this, but like at Kutztown, we have a committee within the department that evaluates, and then the chair writes a letter, and there's levels above that. But for them to like contextualize what you're doing, because like in lots of letters, and most letters, they're extremely long, and they say everything they've done is very important. And then if you get a chair letter that says like, this thing the designer has done is equivalent to a journal entry, that makes things very clear to people who aren't designers. Like, also the chair letters are usually shorter. I mean, it's weird being on the committee. When I went up for promotion, I imagined somebody would look through every page of my binder and like read it like this beautiful narrative that I had like planned. I had little section headings in each thing, and little paragraph explaining the pages they're about to see, like, look at how many committees I attended, and then I like summarized it. It was nonsense. And now that I'm on the committee, like, we're realistically evaluating 5 faculty members every week. We each read everyone's content, we discuss it, then we meet with them, and we can change our decision. But like, when we used to have binders, nobody was reading all the binders. And if anyone told me no one was going to read all my binders, I wouldn't believe them. Because I saw Denise's binders. They were beautiful. Why wouldn't anyone want to read those things? But that let everyone who keeps saying like contextualize it, that's totally true. It's extremely helpful. And I don't think they have this problem in art. I don't see that. When we review portfolios for artists, it's very clear. They exhibit, it's a solo show, you know, it's, you know, somewhere prestigious, that's very clear. But it's not clear for design. So the people who justify it well seem to, at least at our institution, seem to do well. And the ones that just say everything they do is great and write 50 pages saying that don't do so well. I don't know if that was helpful, but.
I think that's so true. Like trying to make it easy for the people reviewing your stuff is really important. Thinking of the pages and pages of things that they need to go through, all that reading and all the contextualization. I totally agree, Josh, that the better we can do on our end in terms of organizing and making it clear and simple for all the reviewers, the better it will be through that process. Plus we're designers, so that's what we should do, right?
Maybe that's something that we should do as part of the UCDA Design Education Committee, is maybe create an online resource or a list of different journals or different things that faculty could look to for submissions, whether we break it up into publications, if we break it up into competitions or different things like that, or collaborative projects. That might be something to bring to the committee.
Just to throw this out there too, UCDA has just launched a journal. We're currently working on the specifics for a peer-reviewed section for professors. So that's something that will be, and Denise is helping with that. So look for that in the near future.
And Josh says the DEL conference.
It's digitally engaged learning.
Hmm.
It's a mix of educators and I think people in the field. It's a good conference, but there's some journal that's attached to that as well. I can look it up. I'll look it up.
Something that was helpful also is trying to, and this was a mentor that told me this at MSU, trying to harvest CVs. So if you know anyone or you come across a CV, just to kind of get a gauge of where they are in terms of the RPT scale and where you are and where you may want to go. And it's also a great way to kind of see what those resources are. Yeah, the AIGA Design Educators has dialectic. There's of course the organizations in Europe, like the European Academy of Design. There's the Design Research Society. Yeah, Gabby. There's MODE, if you're into motion graphics. IASDR. IID, International Institute of Information Designers. UDA, which I'm the president of, United Designs Alliance, which is based in Korea, Design and Culture. Now they're really coming in. ICOD, formerly ICOGRADA. Going to the ICOD website is good because they connect with a lot of international events and opportunities also. Well, we're a little past 6 o'clock. Are there any pressing questions that any of you would like to discuss? I think we've just gotten to the nitty-gritty here. SIGGRAPH, yeah, visible language. I think we are the support group, Gabby. And Tad, it sounds like there are going to be more of these UCDA conversations coming.
Yeah, we'll be getting together with the Design Education Committee. So if anyone has topics that you would like to talk about, let us know, reach out to us, and definitely keep a lookout for the schedule, and we'll get more of these on the calendar.
Quick question, Tadson. Are these conversations going to be, I know we're recording, but are they going to be made public and available for those that don't attend?
Yes, we will make them sort of like our Elevating Black Design Voices. Those we record, and then we'll make those available for members and non-members.
Well, thank you, everyone. I think this has been great. I hope it's always nice to get together with other academics, graphic designers, and see what we're all kind of working through and what we've experienced, and try to help each other along. So let's stay in touch and look forward to the next UCDA event.